SAP Insider is pleased to welcome Sanjay Poonen, Senior Vice President and General Manager, Enterprise Performance Management, SAP.
Thank you. Thank you very much. How's everybody doing today? Good. I have, over the last day or two, been losing my voice, so hopefully it lasts through the next 75 minutes. And if it doesn't, I'll break into sign language somewhere halfway through. But it's been a great conference. I first off want to just recognize Bonnie and the crew here. They've just done a fantastic job. Let's give them a hand. It's always fascinating when you come to a conference of this kind, and then at every single track, there's competition for people wanting to go to 3 or 4 different sessions. What I thought we'd do today, I know that over the course of the last 2 keynotes and sessions, you've probably had a lot of vision, a lot of sort of strategy and so on. I want to bring it down practically a little bit to you to talk about roadmap and some details about solutions, especially in the areas of performance management, analytics, reporting, because I know that's probably questions on a lot of your minds. And we'll hopefully go over the next hour and 15 minutes. We've got a couple of demos and make this a fairly practical, down-to-earth session. I know there have been a number of questions also about our roadmap, and at the very end of this presentation, I've got a very detailed session. I've held it to the very end so that I can make sure you stay right through the entire presentation. But that's my shameless plug. Nonetheless, hopefully this will give you a very practical guide to how you might think about where you want to invest going forward as you go back to your organizations and plan. And if it helps, that's great. And if it doesn't, you can come afterwards and we'll talk about Elliott Spitzer or how to do a revote in Orlando, in Florida. Okay, nonetheless, let's get started. You know, one of the most interesting dichotomies that has plagued not just IT, but also any organization is how do you bring vision and execution, or strategy and execution together? And this is not just a place where this affects the world of IT. If you take even the world of politics today, right? You have one candidate who talks about vision and strategy, another person that talks about experience. And gosh, wouldn't it be great if you could get both together? And the fact of the matter is, even in the context of our software systems today, there is a place and element for execution systems. That's what we've been doing for the last 15, 20 years in helping automate your processes with SAP software. But typically, if you look at the types of users who use SAP, it's often the people who help automate particular transactions. It's very rarely that your CEO has a login to SAP, okay? Or your senior executive. You have a group of people who probably generate reports, and then you go off and send this to the team as they begin their vision presentations and strategy sessions once or twice a year. And there's a big divide between strategy and execution. Here's a famous saying, where there's no vision, people perish. It takes a visionary to put somebody on the moon. But at the same time, as we all know, vision without execution is hallucination. So the big debate has been, how can we bring these two together so that we can combine the best aspects of strategy and vision with the aspects of execution? No one in the software industry has obviously been able to do this. There's a big divide between the world of how things are done from a strategy and strategy management perspective, often on pieces of paper, on PowerPoint, on a set of collective tools. And then obviously there's a disconnect as they start moving into execution systems. And today what I want to talk about are some ways by which we can bring this world together. That has been the focus of SAP as we think about where we are headed over the course of the next decade. And you probably heard a number of this over the last 2 days' keynotes. This is super important because we believe the business user of the next decade is going to be a user that is able to use software to help make their lives not just more efficient, but more effective. In much the same way in the last 80s or 90s, we helped the people who were in the transaction systems make their lives more efficient. There's 2 elements of this that need to happen. Number 1, is a core element of it that is data. And we'll talk about how at the core of all of this is data. And obviously it needs to be data that's actionable, right? In God we trust, everybody else brings data. So everyone needs to know that in a decision-based organization, we make decisions not by gut, but by fact. You obviously have a gut sense based on your intuition and from learning a lot, but at the core of it, increasingly, a lot of it has to be based on fact. And then obviously tied to this is the management cycle that has to be intricately tied to a measurement cycle. And what I want to show you is how in the context of financial performance management or supply chain performance management, how this world can become practically easier and how we are working on a set of tools and technologies as well as a roadmap that we think is highly differentiated in terms of where the industry is going, as also something that you can practically deploy today, and that's very important. As you know, from the standpoint of where SAP has been focused, we've spent the last 15, 20, 25 years building the world's leader in transactional software. That is a 10, 15, 20, 30, $50 billion market of that order. And we are focused not just in the core suite, becoming something that we can deploy fairly widely, whether it's a finance or a CRM function or a supply chain function, but also industry solutions on top of that. Okay? And fundamentally, what we realized as a company is that for us to be able to grow, in much the same way many of your organizations look to growth in parts of your own expansion, you have to look at the available market, and there's two core parts of where we think there's going to be fundamental growth in our business. One is by taking our solutions and going down market into mid-market types of opportunities. And that's going to be a huge opportunity, as you've probably seen, and many of you who watch CNN or the Sports Center, you see a number of ads by SAP talking about SAP can also be used by companies who are smaller. Many of you are mid-market types of companies. It's going to be a big focus of us. You've seen a lot about A1, about business by design, and you're going to see a lot more of our investment in that area. And we believe many of the innovations that we make in the mid-market will also benefit some of the enterprise-type customers down the road. So that's a key focus. The other focus is the aspect of business user applications. And in this particular area, as you probably heard over the course of the last two keynotes, SAP had to do something quick, dramatic, a little bit disruptive. And we felt it would take us 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years to be able to get to a position of leadership. It also needed to be a place where we infused some new DNA into the company. And this is why we made a very bold acquisition, as you've probably tracked over the course of the 3-4 months, a little bit of a departure from the traditional SAP that you've known, but one where we believe the acquisitions we've done of companies like Versa and OutlookSoft over 2006 and 2007, and now Business Objects at the end of 2007, give us both that DNA as also critical mass to win in the business user market. So I get a number of questions as to why did we do this, and every company goes through that build or buy. And it was very important in this particular market that we were able to get ahead very quickly and then build an integration roadmap for best-of-breed products. And when you make the decision as to you could buy and integrate faster than building, that's the reason we have done some of these acquisitions. And it's important as you look at some of these new solutions, you're able to understand our vision for where we're going, some of the practical aspects of how some of the customers are getting benefit out of them today. This is a very, very key slide, and you probably have seen this from a number of the presenters this week, but let me kind of give you a practical way in which you can think about this. The core inner part of that lower part of that diagram is what every one of you hopefully have in your shops today. The transactional software to help automate your business processes. You're hopefully heard the message about a single GL, about all the benefits of financials, all the benefits of HR, and being able to use as many components of our suite. SAP's benefit there has been integration. We will provide you the best integrated solution. You're not going to see us doing something disruptive in that area, like buying a big supply chain vendor or buying a big CRM vendor that's disruptive. most of what we will do in that area will be tuck-in, so to speak, to continue to innovate. But the benefit you get in the lower part of that diagram is integration. And you should expect that from us, so that you have a best-of-breed solution that has end-to-end functionality for things like order to cash, whatever the case is for your business processes. Now, the top part of that diagram is typically done today in unstructured processes. It's typically done in PowerPoint, it's done on pieces of paper, and the core aspect of what you have seen over the last couple of days and keynotes and from what I'm going to discuss today are ways by which we can help with software, 70 to 80% of that made a lot more automated and more efficient. And then obviously there's going to be a very big part of the brain and the human element that ties the strategy to execution cycle. So we're going to come back and look at this diagram a number of different times. And the notion of how strategy ties to execution is going to be key to the core parts. And hopefully at the end of this, you're able to get a sense of 3 or 4 key pieces of what make that cycle successful at any company. What I'm going to walk you through now are 4 very practical ways by which we can build this house, okay, together, that helps us get an efficient strategy to execution type of cycle. The first step is how in building and utilizing a very stable foundation. And this is the place where we will talk a lot about what you've heard of the last few days in a business process platform and also in the transactional system. Number 2, building the first floor of the house consists of being able to get a trusted data platform. Okay? The second floor of the house involves ensuring that you are empowered with intelligent information. And we'll talk about what that means and how some best practice companies are thinking about that. As you build the roof of the house, you start now deploying strategic differentiation through applications. And this is a fairly practical metaphor that helps you think through not just the context of a house architecture, but literally this is going to be how your information architectures will look as you deploy them. So let's look at them one at a time. Okay? So a stable foundation means that you've got to ensure that your core is stable. This isn't something you're changing every 6 months. One of the key things that we've done at SAP is say our core base foundation is going to change just a couple of times every 10 years. Why? Because we listened to CIOs and they said, listen, we don't go in and change our ERP system every 6 months. That's a hugely disruptive thing. You've got to slow down your pace of having massive new upgrades to your transactional systems. So what did we do? We listened. And we listened through the concept of enhancement packs. So every one of you should have probably heard this since the last Sapphire. And this is a core aspect of how you can now get incremental functionality without it having to be a huge disruptive upgrade. It literally feels like almost a service pack that you might install for your Windows laptop. It gets automatically downloaded. It's fairly non-disruptive, and it gives you incremental functionality. But it doesn't have to feel like you're going to a major new version. We've delivered on several of these enhancement packs, and the core goal is to ensure that your transaction systems are stable, that you've got a stable core. And typically this is going to start in the context of ERP, finance and HR. For many of you, we also delivered CRM 2007 last year, and as you know, a core part of our proposition is being able to tie this transaction. You're going to see us talk a lot about themes that go across the entire suite. That's going to be something that you can count on. The other aspect of what allows us to do this, as well as allows our partners and customers to extend the platform, is a service-oriented architecture on top of this business process platform. So hopefully you've heard this over the last almost 4 or 5 years that SAP has been talking about a business process platform. There are 2,000 plus services in the enterprise service repository, about 29,000 now productive systems of NetWeaver. So we've got a lot of deployment mass, and there is now credibility to this. A lot of our partners that have now built solutions on top of this, system integrators or customers who have innovated themselves, will say that part of the benefit now you get from SAP is a lot more openness to innovate faster, either on your own, through partners. It also allows us to be able to ensure that various aspects of our platform can innovate faster and faster in cycles. Okay, so this is part of what hopefully you're able to see as part of the core platform. The second part, the first floor now of the house, is ensuring that we get trusted data. Okay? And at the core of this is ensuring that all the aspects of what you might typically look at, what's underneath the iceberg, okay, what you don't see in the iceberg, is typically all the problems that people have with data. Things like poor data quality. Okay? The fact that all my data is not just coming from SAP. It's coming from non-SAP systems, and I need a way to ensure that I've got a very robust and scalable data integration strategy for that. And the fact that once I have got that data, it's inconsistent. It needs to be cleansed. It needs to be reconciled. It needs to be enriched, so on and so forth. And this is one of the places where a lot of projects go wrong. One IT manager joked with me that when typically the project goes wrong, his excuse is, or what he comes back with, he tells his manager, I've got you a couple of tickets to go in hunting with Dick Cheney. But you know, that's hopefully the comical way of getting out of it. But the most poignant part of this is most projects fail because there isn't a consistent way. This is almost as important as the foundation. In many places, having a core stable platform but not having a data management strategy is one where you will typically fail. I think you're going to see a lot more emphasis from not just SAP, but you're going to see even sort of conferences of this kind where we talk a lot more about data management. Data management is going to be core to helping us understand how you can get complete transparency from your source systems all the way to a dashboard, so to speak. One of the core aspects of what Business Objects brings us is tremendous amount of credibility, a tremendous amount of technology in this area that SAP didn't have. Hopefully you'll get a chance as you look at some of their technologies, the breakouts perhaps at this conference or at the booths, to look at ways by which you can use a very robust platform for data integration. This is one of the best. I've spent years in this industry, and one of the things we liked about Business Objects was their robust data integration capabilities. They've got one of the world's best data quality tools. And here's an example of a customer that's been able to get a global data integration strategy in place with some of those tools. So I encourage you to think about how that enterprise information management layer is built on a robust and strong platform for the rest of your information architecture. Okay, let's move to the next layer of the house. This is ensuring that now that you've got a stable core, that's the foundation, and you've got the first floor ready, a data management platform, you're now ready to start saying, how do I start distributing this information? How do I ensure that the information is intelligent to empower people to start making decisions faster? And many of you don't need a lot of this data to be convinced that this is a huge challenge in ways by which it can be efficiently shared. Most often, people are making decisions today, often in gut, on the basis of just gut. Okay? And there's an excuse often that my intuition is good and probably reconcilable, and 60–70% of the time, maybe you'll be okay. But God forbid that one time you make a decision based on your gut that happened to be wrong, and you end up with a colossal failure. Now, it's not just important that you have the right data, but it's also important how you interpret the data. You've probably all heard this comical example of a sophomore at Harvard who came out of his statistics class and jumped in the Charles River and drowned because he had calculated that the average depth was 4 feet. Okay? So it's not just obviously knowing what the data is, an accurate assessment of it, is being able to interpret it. Okay? So in much of this is the area where Business Objects also brings us tremendous amount of credibility. They are the market leader in deploying this. Here's examples of some of the customers who have gotten tremendous amount of ROI. This is one of those places where you can get very, very quick returns on data. There are examples of customers everywhere from the finance to an operational side have been able to get very concrete ROI. And this is the place where visibility of inventory allows you to plan better. You have less possibilities of write-downs. Visibility of procurement and spend allows you to rationalize your suppliers. Visibility of your accounts payable and accounts receivable allow you to make better finance-based decisions. In general, this is something that can help across the organization, and it's very important that these tools are easy to use. One of the places where we see a number of these systems allowing users to go well beyond just what's inside their firewalls is also information sharing that goes across the network. Okay? You heard about business network transformation. And part of SAP's vision here is that information will move beyond just the individual, first to teams, and then to networks. And part of enabling a network is the fact that you allow customers and partners to share in select parts of the information that you think is important. You may not want them to see all your salary and HR information, but it's very important that customers and partners are now part of a visibility process that allows you to potentially tie product or inventory or whatever the case might be. And many of you are starting to do this. Here is an example of a customer, a very well-known customer, Travel Velocity, that's able to display the information for hotels, as an example. And you can understand in the airline industry, the more visibility you have, the less possibility you have of inventory or whatever it might be. In their case, inventory could be empty seats on a plane or empty rooms in a hotel. A big part of success in the entertainment and lodging industry is utilization. So the visibility of not just what one has inside an organization, but being able to share this across your firewalls with software that lets you do that in a secure fashion is something that we see as a key benefit to what this can help you. So think about empowering intelligent information in ways that goes well beyond just inside your firewalls. Now, many of you will probably say, listen, where does this probably fit into my NetWeaver BI world? And this is how, in a very sort of high-level graphic illustration, I know there's a lot of breakouts that go over this in detail, give you a sense as to how you might think about where we see the NetWeaver BI world certainly playing, and also where we see some of the new business objects tools helping us. For one, your investments in BW are absolutely safe. Okay? There is no overlap between that component and the business objects portfolio. If it is, it's minimal. And for those of you who have decided to invest in BW as a strategic platform for your enterprise data warehouses, there's about 14,000 that have deployed systems, 7,000 of them in production. So we've had a lot of success there. And that's been part of what we have pushed over the course of the last 7-8 years. That investment is safe, and you're going to see us continue to double down. That's an area where no other vendor in the industry has made as much progress. It's hard work getting a complete data warehouse in place, and you're going to see us continue to make innovations to allow that to be more performant. You've seen that with BIA, as also more flexible in the sets of tools that will allow you to administer that more efficiently. Another key component of what you will continue to see us innovate from the SAP portfolio is master data management. Again, no overlap with business objects, but it should give you a sense that we're going to double down in the success that we've had in ensuring that not just data gets cleansed, but you have effective tools to ensure you have a catalog of data in one synchronized fashion. The part where SAP was honestly weak, and many of you will admit this by your own deployment of third-party tools, has been the front-end deployment of business intelligence to empower intelligent workers. Many of you have made your own choices where you've used SAP front-end tools in some restricted fashion, and then you purchase business objects or Cognos or whatever it might be to satisfy your business users, right? And probably the biggest statement to where we were in that market relative to the competition is market share. And one of the things we see as a significant advantage is bringing that innovation now from the world's market leader, business objects, in these front-end tools. And it will give you a tremendous amount of credibility now to be able to go back to your business users, deploy some of the types of things you saw at companies like Travel Velocity and TrueServe and so on. And for places where you're already using business objects, this is just now an opportunity for you to extend this even further, both at the context of information delivery tools as also some of the underlying data platform for enterprise information management, things like ETL and data quality. So hopefully you get a sense that this is very strategic to us. We don't see the usage of business user and business intelligence tools as something that's tactical. It makes a huge difference in the perception of a business user of our systems and applications. It's also the basis for us building many of the applications at the top layer of that house that we're going to talk about in a second. It doesn't change our openness to allow you to use third-party tools if you've decided to use another one. You will, of course, however, see us do a lot more integration now to our core platform to allow SAP customers to get that benefit. So expect, for instance, that business objects will integrate over the course of the next several years much better than a Cognos or a MicroStrategy ever will be able to. And this is the benefit of having an operating system, so to speak, of our core platform, the transaction platform and NetWeaver, as well as tools and applications on top of that where we can bring better and better integration for allowing our customers to benefit from that. Okay? Now, the final layer of the house is ways by which we can drive strategic differentiation. We've got the platform stable, we've got our data in place, we've started to distribute that information and tools, and now we're looking for ways by which more and more packaged applications can help us drive this faster and more efficiently than having to build this over and over again. Okay? And the nature of the ways in which these business user applications need to play is very, very different from a traditional transactional processing application. For number one, you're going to find that this is one where having less IT involvement is the preference of where the market's going. Part of the reason we saw some success at companies like OutlookSoft, that you're going to see in a second in terms of the demo, was they were successful at deploying solutions that were business-owned, with IT assisting, as opposed to IT-owned and business rejecting. Okay? And what we want to be able to do is provide a way by which you, especially those of you who are in IT, can now go back to your business users and show a solution that you feel proud of, that they embrace, rather than them feel that you're shoving something down their throat. And we had traditionally taken a very IT-focused approach to most of our solutions in the past. Most of our successful customers and ones who are extremely loyal to us took some of our solutions in this area and forced it down the throat of the business users, and some were successful. But probably the biggest testament to the fact that we weren't successful in areas like performance management was we had probably 4 or 5 times the number of customers using a Hyperion or a Cognos than people using our own solutions within our own base. Okay? And we took this seriously. And again, asked ourselves in this area, do we build, do we buy? And in the same way that you make your own decisions, we have to ask ourselves, is it faster to build, and perhaps it takes us 3 or 4 years, or buy and integrate? And you'll see here we made some fairly radical decisions to make some acquisitions that allow us to move much faster in the market. We've had some significant traction over the last 6 months. And it's because at the end of the day, here are the types of attributes we hear from the users of these applications. These aren't ones which require a IT person to come back and do a lot of gymnastics when you're trying to make it flexible. It's fairly easy to customize it by an analyst, not by a person who understands the core aspects of systems. It needs to be a lot more unified than having things that look very, very disparate. It needs to embrace the types of environments that users like Microsoft Office. So this gives you a sense of where our headset has been at as we've thought about the strategy of where we take this. And now let's take this practically into 1 or 2 areas in finance, and then we'll show you a demo of how this looks, and then we'll also talk about how finance can go now into other parts of the enterprise. If you talk to any CFO today, they'll tell you that they are probably focused on 4 of these things here. We polled a number of CFOs, and many of you work in finance organizations, and you can probably attest to this. This was actually research done by CFO Magazine. And typically what we found from these CFOs was they were focused on 4 things. Number 1, keeping their transactions running. Number 2, allowing them to get a better sense of their compliance activities. Number 3, allowing them to manage their performance better. And number 4, manage their people. Okay? The fourth one is not something software can do. It's something that obviously an organization allows their finance people to help become more strategic. Finance people now aren't the bean counters of 20, 25 years ago. Many of you who've read Forbes or Fortune know that the most powerful woman in the world was named Inder Nui. She was the CFO prior to that. When it came time to integrate Quaker Oats, they gave Inder Nui the job to do that. She did a great job, and she became now the CEO. So many of you in finance organizations are becoming more and more strategic business partners of an organization, and you're going to be looked to do things that are much more strategic than probably your counterparts were 25 years ago. One CFO joked about it as follows in these three priorities. Number one, allows me to have my back office running. Number two, keeps me out of jail. Number three, helps me understand where I should be going. These three priorities are what we believe the finance organization is focused on today and over the course of the next several years, except that increasingly the focus is going to be not on just keeping the transactions humming. That's a fairly solved science. We've helped you do this over the last 25 years. Increasingly, the focus is going to be on the aspects of compliance and where do we take the business going forward. And that's what we affectionately call governance, risk and compliance, and performance management. Very, very simple. For the first time in the industry now, you have seen SAP, and we're the first one to do this, bring together these three important topics that are highly strategic to finance people, and pretty much what the conference has been about. Okay? Making sure you've got your transaction systems with the modern state-of-the-art there. Single GL is an example. And the innovations of the general ledger and many other areas of finance. Second aspect, many of you have been here for the GRC conference. You've seen a lot of what we're doing there. Performance management. These three core pillars, and perhaps if you were to put something in the middle of that triangle, it's business intelligence. What we see are the core aspects of what every finance executive should have as their core systems going forward. Now, if you double-click inside the financial performance management part of that, the top left, we see the cycle forming in four very simple steps. First off, you set your strategies. Okay? Secondly, you begin a planning process. Third, you compare that plan to an actuals. In the finance world, actuals comes from a consolidations tool. Number four, you begin the modeling process and some sophisticated profitability tool. It's a very simple process, and it's intuitive, right? If you think about the way in which you begin, or your organization begins your process for a yearly effort of where you're going, your CEO probably lays out a scorecard saying, here are my top priorities. I'm going to grow revenue by X, I'm going to cut costs by Y, and I'm going to increase my service levels by Z. Okay? That's examples of a strategy management effort. It's often done today in a PowerPoint or an Excel and sent down then to the planners, who then begin saying, okay, how do I now match the budget? How do I match the head count? How do I do all that effort to take care of the needs of the CEO? Then compare that against the actuals of last year, or from a rolling perspective, the actuals of a particular quarter. And finally, figure out how we model this. This is a fairly simple four-step process. And what we have done at SAP is built software or acquired software and integrate that to fit this process. Okay? And it's for the first time again in the industry that in the performance management space you have software that can fulfill all four aspects of this circle. Okay? And the good news is it's not just SAP saying that these are the important and necessary components of a performance management portfolio. You've got the thought leaders saying the same thing. If you pulled out the January issue of Harvard Business Review, and I can guarantee many of your C-level execs read this every month, there's an article called Mastering the Management System by Kaplan and Norton. And it's a great article. I would recommend everybody here read it, because it's a succinct 10-page article that talks about, in very simple fashion, it has no description of vendors, but pretty much describes what I just showed you in the previous diagram. How do you set up a management system? And what they call the management system is what we're calling performance management. Simple 4 steps. You develop the strategy. You translate the strategy, and that's probably a little bit more of human and software working together. So 1 and 2 would be strategy management. You begin then your planning of operations. Okay? You begin then the execution. All right? That's the place where you compare it to actuals. You then start monitoring that. Again, that's again a combination of places where software and human mediation help. And finally, you start adapting and testing this with a profitability modeling solution. This is identical to what I just showed you before. Well, he's got the slide going counterclockwise, I've got mine going clockwise. But it's the same picture, and in essence, the way in which we believe the future of this industry is headed. The good news is you can't find a single vendor that's bringing that together today. Everybody has been focused, if you move back to the previous slide, just on two elements of this in the market, planning and consolidations. That's all they've done. And the traditional market has been doing this in a separate way than just doing it in a more unified kind of fashion. For the first time now, you have the ability to do these now as part of a differentiated suite and something that's increasingly more and more unified. So let's step through them one at a time. Strategy management, you've seen a number of these. Hopefully you've seen a demo of how we can help you do this better with software. This is typically done with tools, PowerPoint, and so on. Strategy management is a great set of technology, and we've had great success over the course of the last 9 months at pioneering a way by which this can be done to help organizations get alignment from the top floor to the shop floor, so to speak. Okay? And as you look at examples of this, here's an example of a 15,000 user deployment at Sears. And as many of you know, in retail businesses, the more that you can connect what's their shop floor, so to speak, or the store floor, to the top floor, you get increased visibility and alignment across the entire organization. And this is a place where something as simple as cascading down the objectives, ensuring that everybody's visible on the initiatives that need to be get driven, and they are tied then to goals, is something that the whole organization drives. Good success, and hopefully this is the first part of that circle that's important. You're going to see a demo in a little bit about planning. I'm not going to talk a lot about it here, but Jennifer's going to come up in a little bit, and you'll see a demo of this solution in action. This was the company formerly known as OutlookSoft. Let me mention, you know, the fundamental thing that impressed us when we did the acquisition of OutlookSoft was they were premised around two very simple ideas. And you know, most companies who are successful take 2 or 3 very simple concepts and build a business on that. It was started by people who left Hyperion, executives who left Hyperion, with 2 frustrations that they looked to solve. Number 1, they were frustrated that Hyperion had taken a separate approach to planning and consolidations. Okay? And they felt that it was very important that plan and actuals were visible in the same tool. Okay? One of the most common feature requests that people were, the product managers of the consolidations product of Hyperion were trying to put into the product of consolidations was more planning features. And you could see that increasingly the market was looking for plans and actuals to be in a unified environment rather than have the controller and the FP&A person have very different tools. So that was the core aspect of what became the basis for building that company 7 years ago. Second was, let's build a solution embracing a tool that everybody loves, Microsoft Excel. Okay? So these fundamental 2 innovations, which were unification and a more usable system, built a solution that now we've seen a great amount of adoption of, and it's because we find increasingly companies want to take a unified view of planning consolidations. There shouldn't be a place where you're fighting Excel, you're embracing it. But even within embracing Excel, you have to have a structured way by which people interact with Excel. One of the beauties of this solution is the notion of a task pane or an action pane. And you'll see ways by which that allows a user to get extremely structured and guided through their navigation of Excel. Here's an example of a customer. And typically what ends up happening in the case of especially planning applications is you're taking things that were typically taking weeks, a lot of human mediation, and bringing that down to days. Okay? This is an example of a customer that got an award for their success. Lionsgate, as you know, they produce a number of movies that you've probably seen. And in a volatile industry like this, the quicker and faster you can respond. We think that the future of planning is one where you're not going to be doing a rolling 5-quarter or a once or twice a year planning cycle. You're going to be wanting to do things in a more adaptive, real-time fashion. So the quicker that you're able to very quickly run a planning scenario, test it to see if that's going to actually work, make appropriate changes, and then run your business, the better off you're going to be at being able to adapt to change. Okay? Consolidations, again, a very important critical process. Many of you have got some questions here we'll talk about in the roadmap about where we're going. The key point here is to ensure that your closing process is more efficient, it's quicker, but also more compliant. Okay? You're going to see us do a lot more in this area at being able to tie the consolidations process with things in GRC, so that you can count on not just a consolidations process that's fast, but that we can run things like process controls on the consolidations process to ensure it's compliant. Okay? Directionally, that's where we're headed. Examples of our customers that have been successful doing this have typically taken something that are days down to multiple weeks down to days, and the faster you're able to close your books, the better you're able to react when you acquire a new entity. Most of the CFOs I talk to say, listen, we want to be in a place where we can do a virtual close so that as we acquire a new entity, let's just assume that we can get them on our SAP systems quickly. We'd also like to be able to close our books without having to tell the street it's going to take us a few more weeks because we've just done an acquisition. This is where you need a robust and scalable consolidations process in the back end. Finally, the fourth step of this is model and optimize, profitability management. Now, you might ask, some of this might exist in the transaction system in COPA. Okay, many of you have used that. But most often, you don't want to change your cost and profitability drivers in your transaction system. You want a separate place where you can model this, and model this in an environment that's extremely friendly to business users. This was the company formerly known as ALG that Business Objects had acquired, and it's a beautiful tool. It's one of those tools that business users like. We've had great amount of success at some of our largest customers. And by the way, any of these solutions that you've seen work in SAP or non-SAP environments. So if you're an SAP customer, you can benefit from this, and you can expect us to do a lot more by way of integration. If you're either a customer who's not yet deployed SAP wall-to-wall, we have several places where we've got SAP in one department, and we've got JD Edwards in another area. You can use these solutions across multiple transaction systems. An example, this is actually a good example of a customer that's not an SAP ERP shop. They in fact use Oracle ERP, wall-to-wall. They in fact use Hyperion in many different places. But for all their strategic profitability calculations, they rely on SAP now, or SAP Business Objects. And you will find that notions of customer and product profitability are core to what's keeping the boardroom very, very occupied right now, especially if the economy starts going a little sideways. Everyone's going to look to find ways by which they can squeeze more out of costs. Understanding how we do growth and revenue in a profitable fashion is on every executive's mind. So that's one that you can talk about and think about as you deploy your solutions. In a moment, I'm going to have Jennifer come up and do a demo, but let me kind of close out this section by talking about the loop that we talked about at the beginning of the session. We talked about how important it is to be able to tie strategy to execution. I showed you this two, we affectionately call this the 8 diagram inside SAP. There are 2 loops, a top loop and a bottom loop. But in that top loop of tying strategy to execution, those 4 steps that I talk about, strategy, management, planning, actuals, and profitability management, fit completely isomorphically right into this diagram. Okay? In fact, the top part of it is exactly where the executives start, or the teams that are starting to drive your strategy, where you start getting your initial forms of decisions as planning. The intersection with the bottom 8 diagram is actuals. That's where the data starts flowing in, and it doesn't have to be just a finance system. In a finance area, the actuals come from a consolidations process. You can repeat the same diagram, whether it's a finance view of the world, and we'd call that financial performance management, or in a supply chain view of the world, and Ravi is going to show you a demo of that, where the same diagram would apply in the supply chain view of the world. And we see this as the construct for an enterprise performance management of where we believe the world is going. Okay, so join me in welcoming Jennifer upstage. Thank you, Jennifer. While Jennifer is getting set up with her demo, Jennifer joined us from OutlookSoft and was one of our top pre-sales folks in the field, and she's been driving a lot of the success with customers. One of the things that we liked about the solution, as we said, was its ability for an end user, a business user, to use the solution without IT involvement. Okay? and hopefully, as you'll see, parts of that entire cycle, but with a particular focus on planning, you'll get a sense as to how the solution works. So take it away, Jennifer.
Thank you, Sanjay. So today what I'm going to do is start by giving you just an overview of the process. And you may have seen this scenario in some of the other keynotes that you've attended earlier in the week, so don't worry, I'm not going to take you through the same story you've seen maybe 2 or 3 times already. But I just want to set some context around what I am going to share with you. So as you can see, I'm at a page that would be representative of kind of a holistic way of looking at the financial performance management aspect. And there's some components there of the governance, risk, and compliance as well, which I'll touch on just briefly. So at the top of the page, I get a summary of objectives. How am I performing overall to strategy? Okay, and this comes back to what Sanjay was introducing around aligning strategy with execution. In the middle part of the page, I can see what every CFO typically looks at first, which is where are my KPIs? How am I performing to what I'm expecting in the overall business? And then what processes are driving the business? So those would be things like planning, consolidations, forecasting, and we'll take a look specifically at some of the forecasting and planning aspects. Up in the upper right quadrant, I can see some competitive information, and then I get a general overview of what risks are coming up in the business that I need to be concerned about. Okay, and you may have seen earlier, taking that through, identifying the risk, putting in some mitigation action, tying that back to initiatives from a strategic management perspective, and then going in and updating a forecast. Okay, so we're going to skip that first section and jump right into the forecasting component. So if we take a look at what a process actually looks like within the application, you can see in this view kind of a summary of what an overall process may consist of. And this would be representative of kind of that month-end process. So it incorporates some steps that are part of consolidation. So obviously at the end of every month we're closing the books. But then we also tend to roll into this process of updating forecasts. Okay, and so coming out of that biannual type of planning mentality that Sanjay mentioned and rolling into more of a rolling forecast methodology where each month as we get new updated information, we roll into a forecast. So this gives me a quick view of what are those steps of the process. You see some of the controls that are put in place. There's workflow associated within this, right? So I can see exactly where each of my business units are that are participating in the process and what steps may need approvals and those types of things, as you can see. All right, so from an end user perspective then, let's take a look at how the end user would interact with a business process. Okay, so from this perspective, we can see that the user is going to see a set of steps that are required for them to participate in this particular process, okay? So in this particular instance, we're coming into midway through the process, actually as part of the last step. We've already gone through the first 6 steps in this particular case, which are that consolidation aspect, and now we're ready to update forecast information. So you'll see it's presented again in a very user-friendly way. I don't have to be an expert user in an application. I get a task list essentially of here's the steps of the process, and then I can quickly and easily enter into any one of those steps, which opens the appropriate interface, the appropriate schedule, presents the information for me as a user. Okay? Now you'll see here we've come into actually an Excel environment. Okay? So all of the functionality that users know and like in Excel today is available within the application. Right? So I don't have to learn a new interface. I can still continue to model, use all that Excel functionality right within the application. So here we're looking at kind of a summary view of direct profit. All right, so I want to take a look at what if I make some changes to this, maybe modify some assumptions in the overall process. So to do that, we're just going to come into a unit perspective, okay, which is driving our overall forecast. We can see the information presented, kind of a summary of what's been happening the last several months, as well as that 12-month rolling forecast view. So I could simply come in as a user and start updating information, all right, as I would in Excel, as you can see, and it highlights for me anything that's changed, so it's very visible what I'm doing as I work within the application. Now there's also some additional capabilities within the application that users typically like. So if you think about the way we forecast, it's pretty rare for us to come in and know exactly what the number is month over month, right? So what's more beneficial for me is what about the modeling capability? How could I take an annual assumption and spread that? How could I base my forecast information on where we've been historically? So to do that, there's some application capability that would allow me, for example, to come in, put in the number of units that we want to, let's say, spread. So we expect to sell 6,000 over the next 12 months. And then you can even apply seasonality. So for those of you in seasonal types of businesses, you can quickly apply that, and it's going to build out then for you the forecast. Okay, so pretty simple way of working within the application. You also can do some more dynamic things, which typically, I'm not sure this is such a finance thing, but from a sales perspective, sales for people that are doing forecasts like to do things like drag the graph, right? And as I do that, I can see my input changes. So the whole idea behind this, again, is a very user-intuitive way of navigating within an application. So you don't have to learn anything outside of what I'm already comfortable with in Excel. So from here, then, we can simply go ahead and submit information back to the application. And then we can come back over to our summary view and see an update of that information, okay? So as the information is submitted, everything is automatically calculated, consolidated, so we get real-time results without having to wait for batch processes or wait for someone centrally to consolidate forecast or plan information, all right? So just real quickly, I'd like to take you through also another example. So this is kind of on the input collection side, but there's also typically a need, whether we're talking about planning, the planning process, the forecasting process, to do quite a bit of reporting. And that comes in a couple different formats. It comes in needs to do ad hoc type of analysis, where I just want to compare forecasts maybe to actual, or I have a specific need, I'm doing some what-if analysis. Or the secondary piece is there's just standard reports that we're putting out. So we're going to take a look at a first example of just, how would I create an ad hoc report? So I have Excel, right? We saw that on the input side. So obviously there's a lot of things using native Excel that we could do, but maybe I also would just like to use something that's kind of predefined for me. So I don't start from scratch. I'm not starting from a blank sheet every time. I have a list of delivered templates with the application. So for example, maybe I want to do some analysis on which products are most contributive to our profitability, for example, okay? And then you can very quickly and easily navigate. So for example, instead of looking at a particular view, West US, which is where we were just completing our forecast, I may prefer to see a more consolidated view, assuming, of course, that I have appropriate security to view that. You can see the report refreshes, everything is very dynamic, but again, you still have full control over Excel. If I wanted to do a little bit deeper analysis, maybe I'd like to see the top 5 products. I just make that selection, I see the new list develop, okay? If you would like to focus on the bottom performers, which as finance people, we tend to be pessimistic, and so we like to look at the bottom. I can quickly pick the bottom and see which are my lowest contributing product lines to the overall profit of the organization, okay? So then from here, let's just go back to where we came from, all right? So back to kind of this dashboard view. And typically, if we were to roll forward in the process, so as we go through a forecast scenario, for example, ultimately that information ends up in executives' hands, right? And how does it usually end up there? In the form of some sort of management meeting, perhaps, and ultimately it's typically put in PowerPoint, right? And what happens in PowerPoint typically is the information is static. It's locked in PowerPoint. We get in a meeting, I'm showing you a slide, and I can't do anything with it, right? So if you ask a question, what happens if we do this? I can't react. So one of the things that we have gained as SAP with the acquisition of Business Objects is a solution called Excelsius, which some of you may have seen, which gives us a much more dynamic way of interacting within PowerPoint, all right? So now we're in a PowerPoint presentation, we're sitting down with executive management, I can see summarized information from actual as well as the latest forecast, and I can actually now dynamically within a meeting modify this information, okay? So for example, if we're sitting down and we say, what happens if we want to increase or reduce sales allowances? What does that do to the overall plan that we're looking at? And you can see the adjustment gets taken into account. We're able to see that. We can also quickly say, what if we bump up luxury sales revenue? Or what if we want to do a reduction, let's say, in sales expenses? Okay, so all of those types of things are very easy and quick for us to model. And if we like this, we come to agreement as a management team, we could very quickly just save that as a new scenario and say, this is what we want to be the new plan. Okay, so just quickly, hopefully that gives you an idea, an understanding of how financial performance management, what it looks like, and how the pieces begin to fit together.
Jennifer, what's been your experience at how easy and quick it is to get some of these solution apps? Is this something that takes months and years, or what's your experience been with some of the clients you worked with?
So I would say typically it's a few month process, so typically 2 to 3 months depending on, of course, scope of implementation and those types of things, but it does tend to be an application that goes in very quickly.
Great. Let's give it up for Jennifer. Thank you very much. The two parts of the demo that always get me excited is the dragging up and down of the charts and the manipulation of the dials here. But hopefully you get a sense as to how this can be a visual process and an interactive process. What you saw there, for instance, Excelsius running inside PowerPoint, can also be inside a PDF as an example. And imagine that your static information now can all of a sudden become interactive, where you're doing this in a board meeting. You're doing the planning scenarios in an environment where you don't have to be driving it as the IT person, the business person did that. Okay? So what you've seen there, we're now going to take in a couple of minutes here to another type of scenario where we believe the very same type of benefits that you saw for finance and the circle of strategy, plans, actuals, and profitability, right, can be extended to any part of the organization. It doesn't have to be restricted to finance. Often, finance is the center of the universe because they release the P&L. But if you extend this into any part of the operational, customer or supplier, the very same principles apply. Okay? So let's welcome Ravi Mohan. And Ravi's going to show us an example of how this applies in the context of supply chain performance management. Ravi, by way of introduction, runs operational performance management, solution management in my group, and has been responsible for driving some of the vision of how we can take the very same ideas that you saw in finance to other parts of the organization, other lines of business, HR, supply chain, and so on. So take it away, Ravi.
Thank you, Sanjay. So here I'm actually going to talk about just two scenarios, making sure that you can get the message that the idea is strategy to execution, which Sanjay talked about. I just would see or show you how it can be applied in a supply chain or an operation kind of a setting. The other thing is, how do you take the financial strategy and then translate that into an operational strategy? How do you tie those two together? And the third thing would be that how do you actually infer some causal relationship? So it's not something about, hey, I know that cost of goods is made up of inventory costs and so on and so forth, but also what does the cost of goods actually impact on the other decisions in your organization? So let's fire away. This is what would be a scorecard for a supply chain or VP of operations. He comes in, he's looking at, it's a CPG company, and I can actually have different perspectives. I can look at supply chain foods from my context. That's my business or line of business. I'm looking at this, and I have a balanced scorecard kind of a perspective where we're saying financial, I have reduced costs, that's my objective, improve asset utilization. On a customer side, I have increased delivery reliability, internal business process, learning and growth. So some of the audience here are from HR, some of them are from finance, but you can relate to this kind of a balanced scorecard perspective where you're measuring your holistic view of your operations. So let's dig into one of these indicator which is showing something like a yellow. So basically, it's an early warning signal. It's not the problem yet, but I want to understand what's going on here. So again, the information is at my tooltips, so I don't have to really dig deep into it. I can just see that, okay, I'm doing well on my percentage of return. So we had a target to reduce our return rates, which is actually trending pretty well. So we have it under control. But on the perfect order side, we're not doing that great. What I want to be able to do is click on this and understand what is that objective made up of. So what I'm seeing here is that my increased delivery reliability is actually made up of a perfect order fulfillment and percentage returns, and it's an average. Okay, so my objective is tied to these two metrics, and I'm measuring that. My score right now is 0.84, and I can also look at the details behind it and see that perfect order fulfillment is made up of customer commit date, order delivery, and delivery in perfect condition. Again, I can very quickly come here. I can look at the charts. I don't have to navigate. All that information is right in front of me. So I can scroll through this. So just to get to a little bit more detail about this topic, I just go to details. So that's simple. So I go to the details, and what I'm actually able to see is that without doing a lot of analysis and building a lot of reports and analysis, I can see that my score currently is 0.88. My target was 90. It also had a benchmark data, so if I compare myself with other CPG companies, I had a benchmark data of 90%, and I'm actually at 79. So not too bad, but again, I have to get it under control. Again, I can look at the contributing KPIs in the same way. and see the trend for last or year to date, and then also look at some of the impacts. What that is trying to tell me is that the perfect order fulfillment is impacted not just by those contributing KPIs, but also there are other factors which are affecting my operations, which are not related to the measurement of this metric. Example being distribution schedule achievement, forecast accuracy, production schedule achievement. I look at these two and I see that, okay, these both are okay, but the production schedule achievement is a problem. I click on this, I can see an year to date. Maybe I want to do a little bit more detail on analysis on this one. I click on that and I see a complete trending of this from year to date, tying my, if you look at the breadcrumbs, increased delivery reliability, perfect order fulfillment, production schedule achievement. So these are not metrics which make up, or they're not a summation of these metrics. This is a causal relationship between these metrics. Again, I'm looking at my score. I'm looking at the actual target benchmark. Again, I'm not doing too well in last 2 months, so I can very clearly see that. What I want to be able to do is, before I make a decision, I want to understand what does this metric impact? Because before I decide arbitrarily that I want to do this, or I want to raise it by 95% or 10 or 100%, I want to see what are the other things which are going to be impacted if I made any changes to this. So now this is a reverse order. Earlier I saw how the perfect order fulfillment is impacted by production schedule achievement. Here what I'm looking at is how production schedule achievement can impact not only the perfect order fulfillment, but some of the other vectors or other measures which are part of my operations, something like order delivery, percentage stockouts, fill rates. So again, I want to just not look at that information. It should be actionable, as Sanjay pointed out. I can go to optimize. And as Sanjay said that he loves to play with these dials, and so does my 2-year and 4-year-old. So what I'm looking here is, I look at this slider, and I can actually see that, okay, you know what? Now I'm trending, I'm equal, and what is this level? 97%. I can right now come here, email to somebody and say, you know what? This is where my production schedule achievement should be, that 97%, because then I can meet my targets for perfect order fulfillment, for percentage stockouts, fill rates, and order delivered. So that's one scenario where you saw that it was kind of a starting point. You had a pre-can dashboard and a metric system, a scorecard. You came in, you did your analysis, you made some decision, you made some optimizational decisions, and then you came in and you took an action. Now the question which typically comes up is, okay guys, I understand that this looks really cool, but what will it take? Can I do it? Can a business user do it? So that's the other part of my demo. So let's look at a very simplistic way, and I know that you can actually may try to do that in BW at your own risk. But there is a metrics library here, what I'm looking at, and what I'm trying to do is I want to add inventory cost to my metrics or to my score model. So I look at inventory cost, I look at what is the definition of inventory cost, where is the source, how is it calculated, who I affect, and so on and so forth. So what I want to be able to do is add forecast accuracy as a high impact item. So there is no relationship between forecast accuracy and inventory carrying cost other than this saying that if your forecast accuracy is bad, your inventory carrying cost would be high. And that could be based upon your causal inference, that could be based upon correlation, that could be based upon your previous or historic data. But again, I want to make sure before I add that metric to my system, I want to make sure that I can specify this relationship and I say there is a high correlation with this metric because somebody else is responsible. So I don't want to be singularly responsible for inventory carrying costs unless or until you fix the forecast accuracy. So what I established as relationship, I come in here, I see that it's been added here. Now if I wanted to check out what is the forecast accuracy, I can see the definition of forecast accuracy, I can see how it is calculated. I go back to inventory carrying costs, and then what I want to be able to see is in a more network kind of a visualization where I can see that inventory carrying costs affects cash to cash cycle. So that's the financial ratios which you all are interested in, return on working capital, return on supply chain assets, and cost of goods sold. But on the other hand, forecast accuracy impacts this metric so that basically it's a circular or it's a chain, it's a network effect. Once I've done this, I can go to my model. Again, this could be your own custom model. You could be using a score model or any industry standard model. In this case, we'll just use a score model, which is used by supply chain professionals, if there is any in this audience. And what I should be able to do is add the inventory carrying cost to my supply chain management cost. So that's the metric I had just configured. I can add that to my supply chain management cost. It shows up here, inventory carrying cost. Again, I don't have to rely on just looking and scrolling. I can actually look at it in a very visual way. And it shows me my score model, how my metrics are laid out, how they're interconnected. And again, I just want to stress the point that these are metrics not based upon calculations, but these are the metrics which are interrelated based upon your data, based upon your operations. And you can specify those. So again, I see that inventory carrying cost has been added. Once I've done that, I should be able to go to my context. I want to check if I want to apply it to my foods division or my confectionery division or my beverages. Let's say for foods division, I pick that. I see the reduced cost objective. So now I have added the metric. I want to make sure I can assign it to the reduced cost objective you saw in the beginning, the scorecard. I add that to the inventory carrying cost. And then I don't want to stop there because I added this metric. I want to make sure there is somebody who's responsible in my organization. So there is a strategy to execution path where I can take somebody, add a metric, and then make somebody responsible. So what I also want to be able to do is I want to make sure that VP of my operations is assigned to this task and they are responsible for it. And then in my case, if I just want to now visualize this, and I'm sorry for the real estate issue here, but you could see this is how your entire network of operations would look like. So you have a supply chain foods, which is your line of business. You have those 4 perspectives on a balanced scorecard perspective: financial, learning, growth, internal business process, customer. And then you can actually look at your objectives, improved asset utilization, reduced cost, and then you can look at the metrics which are related to that. So those are the things I wanted to talk about. Make sure that you understand that the strategy management or the planning or the execution part is not restricted just to finance, but it's also the other business areas, as Sanjay pointed out. So that's it for me, Sanjay.
Ravi, when is this application going to be available? I know this is something new that's in development.
Yes. So 2 points. This will be available by the end of the year. And the second thing is we also want to make sure that we take pride in saying that it's not all about acquisition, but we are also doing some organic innovation. So this is all built organically on the NetWeaver platform, and we are using the same concepts of strategy management, planning, and all the other assets we have acquired from business objects to make sure that we can provide you a holistic view of your operations.
That's great. Let's give it up for Ravi. I'm glad I have the IQ of a 2-year-old to get lost in the bowels of all those trees, but hopefully you get the concept there. That what we are trying to deliver is that same cycle. For many of you who understand supply chains, I'm not an expert in that, and gladly we have many others who are. But there's an intricate tie between the way finance people think about performance management, where your P&L starts driving many aspects of core operations, inventory, cost of goods sold, and the idea is to take that P&L statement and drive it into the core aspects. Let me spend now about 5 minutes or so before we wrap up. And I left this to the very end so that none of you actually leave, okay? And walk you through, this is a fairly detailed slide, but it's very important because I get a lot of questions about roadmap, okay? And I thought I'd make it extremely practical to you to help you understand where our products are going. Much of this was covered in a couple of the breakouts, but I know that a few of the breakouts were standing room only, so if you haven't seen this, that's good, and if you have seen it before, it's good to hear it again. Okay. In all of those 4 aspects, hopefully you've understood that our FPM portfolio, financial performance management portfolio, consists of 4 core pieces: strategy management, planning, consolidations, and profitability management. We've got a roadmap now, which I'm going to go row by row as to what we have done and made decisions around portfolio rationalization and so on. So let's go by this row by row. The top row represents profitability management. SAP had a resell of a solution that technically we can still are available to, but our go-forward strategic solution is the business objects activity analysis that will now be branded profitability and cost management by SAP Business Objects, and that will be the solution. By the way, the blue there represents what came in from the business objects side. The yellow represents what's coming from the SAP side, and that will be our go-forward solution for profitability and cost management. Okay, we will have releases. Probably the most important one is the one at the end of the year, where you will have integration between profitability and cost management. That's the third column rather, to our core NetWeaver platform. There's already beginning forms of integration between profitability and cost management and the business objects BI tools. Okay, look at this. This is what's creating tremendous amount of differentiation at companies like Alcoa that I described, and can become part of your way by which you get a focus on customer and product profitability, an extremely visually innovative and useful tool that your business users will like. Okay, the second row represents strategy management, and as many of you know, we had put into maintenance a couple of years ago, the balanced scorecard component of SCM. It really wasn't competitive, and we felt in this particular area we needed to move aggressively. A company last year named Pilot Software, and that's become now SAP Strategy Management. That is our go-forward solution. There are aspects of the business objects tools, Performance Manager and Objectives Manager, which will be fed into strategy management features, but our go-forward solution is the SAP Strategy Management solution there. That will be integrated to BW and NetWeaver in the first half of this year, and that's something we had stated as part of our roadmap prior to the acquisition of business objects. That will stay as planned. It's going into ramp up. Many of you are using that product today. It's, again, part of what gives you the type of sex and sizzle that you saw in parts of these demos where you can tie strategy to execution. Both of those first two rows are highly differentiated parts of the portfolio. Nobody in the industry has those today. It's part of where we believe we are going to move into this space and extend it well beyond planning and consolidations. I talked about our vision for this being a much broader portfolio for performance management. I'd encourage you to look at those. The goal there will be to ensure that all of these become part of a next generation unified portfolio. Okay, the next two rows are a little bit more complex, so we should go through them a little slower. First off, in planning, we had a number of solutions coming in there, and you can think of this as we've got a lot of detail behind sort of almost 5 products there in planning from both companies. And we've now got an appropriate rationalization process by which we believe we want to invest behind the best product that will help you win with your business users. Okay? The fact of the matter was, with BPS, we had a few hundred customers that were using it, but we had several thousand customers within our own base using Hyperion and Cognos. We looked at it and said, we're either going to spend 4 or 5 years to get BPS to the point where it can compete, or let's acquire and integrate. And that's why we acquired OutlookSoft. We think it's got a tremendous amount of potential. We want to help several of you customers who have already been using BPS. There will be maintenance for those solutions for years to come. We've got at least 5 years of maintenance on that, and there will be tools that we try to develop over the course of the next year and a half to help migrate some of that information into business planning and consolidations, cubes that sit on top of NetWeaver, if that's an SAP environment. Business planning and consolidations can also run in a non-SAP environment. 2 core milestones there is in the Q2 timeframe, we will be integrating business planning and consolidations to NetWeaver. The product will go into ramp up about end of June. And by the end of the year, we will be integrating also to the business objects BI tools, so that you can use business planning and consolidations, formerly OutlookSoft, along with Webby as an example, or Excelsius, kind of somewhat what you saw in Jennifer's demo. There were also 2 planning products that came from business objects. We'd had some penetration in the SAP base, limited, but was fairly successful in the mid-market. We are providing extended maintenance for those products for years, several years, and encouraging many of those customers to move to what we believe is the platform where we will be putting a lot of our strategic investments. And so hopefully those blue boxes there may be a few of the SAP customers here who are using that. We found very little penetration of that within the SAP base. Okay, consolidations is one that's trickier, and probably one where we are taking a more deliberate and sort of determined strategy. Of all the components of SCM, BCS, the Business Consolidation System, was the most successful. Many of you are using this. We believe that it does have a presence in SAP places where you have certainly a complete SAP system. You couldn't use BCS in a heterogeneous ERP environment. So we will continue to support with enhancements through this year as well as legal enhancements through 2013 BCS. So your investment is safe if you're currently using BCS. And then, of course, in the standard 512 policy, you'll get 3 years of extended maintenance. So literally, your investment is safe till 2016. Okay? What we found, though, again, when we compared BCS to where the market was moving, either for a solution where people wanted to do a unified planning and consolidations in a more business-owned environment, kind of the environment that you saw from Jennifer, it was very, very hard to get that in a BCS type of environment. Similarly, some of the success that Business Objects Financial Consolidations, the product formerly from Cartesis, had enormous success at both SAP and non-SAP customers that had a very, very high-end need for legal consolidations, statutory consolidations, especially in Europe, and also countries in France, like ones in France. So we will support all 3 of these products over the course of the next 24 months and build a rationalization plan that will allow us to get to a converged product by the end of 2009. We believe in the US market, there's a lot of interest in a unified planning consolidations product. We've seen a tremendous amount of interest in business planning consolidations to do that. We've seen some interest primarily in Europe in the more sophisticated consolidations tool. We have a decision tree that we can help you understand what might be appropriate. The point of the matter is if you are using BCS today, your investment is safe. If you haven't, and this applies both to BPS and BCS, if you're not started in implementation as yet, we recommend you look at one of these solutions that are going to be part of our strategic investment going forward. It's just so that you can be part of where we are putting our investment, and then we will also build appropriate tools and technologies for the appropriate parts of the migration. Finally, the key point here from the standpoint of our integration and leading to our next generation suite at the end of 2009, we will be doing, by the end of this year, 2 important forms of integration. Integration at the back end of all our FPM assets to NetWeaver BI for customers who care about that. So most SAP customers do. Business planning consolidations, strategy management already will be by the first half. By the end of the year, we will have both profitability and cost management, as well as the former Cartesis business financial consolidations integrated to NetWeaver. That's back-end integration to the data source where SAP typically spits out its data into BW. We will also integrate in the front end to Business Objects BI tools. So think of those as the 2 aspects of what you see, that horizontal bar in the 3rd column, representing NetWeaver BI and Business Objects BI integration. Benefit is you get data out of SAP, it lands in BW, you can use that now for your actuals and consolidations or planning in a much more natural fashion than having to take that data, flatten it out, put it into SBase, as some of our competitors do. You get a lot more native integration now with BPC as an example. Same way, once you've got that data in a place, you may want to now do some very sophisticated query and reporting or build an Excelsius dashboard. That's an example of a use case of a Business Objects BI tool. We want to deliver that all by the end of the year. By the end of next year, the idea is to ensure that irrespective of where these assets came from an engine perspective, we will completely conceal it under the covers, and you will have a next generation solution that's fully unified. And irrespective of whether you're using one of those solutions today, we will help you get to the next generation in a non-disruptive fashion. Okay, let me close with this example. I know that was a lot of detail, but hopefully it's a summary in 5 minutes of where our roadmap is. Many of you sat through the roadmap sessions. If it's not clear, please contact your account executive and we'll make sure that you're briefed on this. There's been some changes, but we do believe it's changes for the better, and we're seeing a huge amount of interest from the market at these new solutions. In the past, I mean, just to give you a statistic, we probably won 10% of the time against the competition, okay, with the previous set of solutions. Our win rate's probably in the order of 90% now. And it's just a testament to the fact these solutions just are embraced now a lot more by business users. Let me talk a little bit about kind of where we see this world going in 30 seconds or 45 seconds. It really is sort of this metaphor. I have a nephew who is 8 years old and plays this game called SimCity. And many of you have probably seen this game. It's a fantastic little toy by which you can actually design a city, set up a library, a fire station, a police station, and then the simulation actually starts modeling real life. An accident happens or a fire erupts, and you get to actually model the way in which you can design a city. And I'm watching an 8-year-old play this, and in reality, what he's doing is playing with an analytic tool. Okay? But it's so concealed in the context of a toy or a video game or a game that he can enjoy and very intuitively understand. The analytics are underneath the covers. Many of you who rent a car from Hertz know that Never Lost allows you not just increasingly now the GPS system, but increasingly the GPS systems are starting to get intelligent. They'll tell you where there's a traffic jam, where there's weather problems, and so on. And we believe the future of performance management is going to be exactly that. Where in essence, as you are making your particular decisions and making appropriate transactions, analytics are just embedded in. Okay? Very much similar to today when you buy a book on Amazon.com, it recommends to you at the end of your purchase what you may want to think about buying next. That's analytics embedded inside the context of a transaction. Transaction being purchase of book, analytics being a recommendation. Netflix is doing the same thing. You rent a movie, it tells you, you perhaps may want this movie too. And it's amazing how that engine of recommendations is getting better and better with more content and more algorithms. That's our view of where we believe this is going. Where inherently you're not thinking about increasingly the separation between transactions and analytics. They become blurred. And that 8 diagram that we saw, the 2 circles, increasingly becomes almost one unified circle. And you don't understand where the end of a strategy decision is and where the beginning of an execution play is. That's our vision. And we believe that that's happening imminently. We think over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, the types of people who will be using this are your and our kids. Okay? And we've got to make software so intuitively usable that it has the type of experience of a SimCity or an Amazon.com or a Netflix. And that's the journey we're on. So we invite you to be part of that journey. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being here today. And hopefully it was a useful presentation for your needs. Thank you very much.
Waking up at the start of the end of the world, but it's feeling just like every other